My name is Margit Sigurðardóttir. I'm chair of the board of the Teaching Academy of the Public Universities of Iceland. And with me are Sean Scully from the University of Akureyri and Guðrún Geirsdóttir from Kennslumiðstöð Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Iceland, both members of the Teaching Academy. And we are now going to talk about collegiality, which is another, is a topic from the criterion, evaluation criteria for the Teaching Academy that many find difficult to understand, and how can I write in my application about participation in conversation about teaching, and what does collegiality and discussion about teaching mean? So I would like to start sharing my experience when I, as I described, started teaching at the University of Iceland. I was given a course to teach and wanted to talk to the teacher that was teaching it before me about, how to organize the course, etc. And the teacher actually went into all the slides from the previous courses. So the idea was that a teacher owns his slides. The way that the course is taught is very much my private issue, and I do not talk about my teaching with anyone. It's a private matter, totally. And I felt I didn't feel very well in this system. I came from the Copenhagen Business School, where there was actually a bit more talk about teaching. So I feel that my teaching has taken off and has become much more enjoyable and better once I started talking about my teaching with others, once I started doing research on my teaching and presenting at conferences and attending conferences on higher education teaching, talking about, what am I doing? How can I do it better? So again, I would like to ask you what your experience about collegiality is, and how have you participated in it, and why is it important? And Sean, if you'd like to start.
Well, I'm going to start with a confession. The first time I heard the word collegiality, I literally had to look it up. I was not familiar with this word. That's slightly embarrassing, but it is what it is. So for those of you out there that maybe haven't heard of collegiality, it is defined by the dictionary as the companionship and cooperation between colleagues who share responsibility. And one of the examples that's given when you Google this is sort of the rapport between like reporters covering stories in a war zone, or, sort of people that are sort of like, engaged in the same tasks, together. So that's kind of the definition of collegiality. And as a student 20 some years ago, I mean, I remember an instance, very similar to Margaret, and where even as a student, I could sense that, this thing called teaching was not something that people talked about. It was not discussed. You as a student shouldn't ask about why things are the way they are, nor should you as a peer of a faculty member, inquire about somebody else's teaching. It's very private and guarded, and it's not something you're supposed to let people look at. And as a student, I found that to be kind of awkward, because I mean, I want to know why things are the way they are, and just to be shut out of the conversation I found kind of sad and isolating. And now as a faculty member, you see very much sort of the same types of things, propagated, to this day, albeit to a lesser extent. I think things are much more open now, thankfully. But yeah, it's definitely something we need to continue to have conversations about.
Mm-hmm. Good on.
I have just going to relate to my experience. I taught for many years on the elementary school level, upper elementary school level, and I was hired to the university because I was very engaged in school development and educational development within that area, and it was really hit me hard when I found out to begin with that talking about your teaching was kind of like talking about your underwear or something. It's something you just do not discuss. You just go into your classroom. So that was a bit frustrating, and I gave it quite a lot of thought. And I thought first, maybe it is because teachers at universities are not actually trained in teaching, so they don't have the language and the concepts that you use when you're discussing your teaching, so they don't have the language to do that. And then also we have our disciplinary research area, and then the teaching is like, you know, the secondary. Well, in other school levels, it's the primary thing, so it's the more of the focus. And I think that's because of that situation. And also I have the experience of, it's sometimes given the name academic freedom means that I'm left alone doing whatever I do. We don't discuss these issues. And we are in a small country, small universities. So usually your colleague might be somebody connected to your research. It might be in another country or internationally. You might have quite a lot of engaged conversations about your research, but not so much about your teaching. So I think because of that, things like Council Academy and the Teaching Academy is trying to force or emphasize the need for a dialogue and collegiality. I can't, you don't know what it means. I can't pronounce it.
It's a complicated concept.
Yeah. So, and I think it's because much of there's not much research on teaching as much as on different levels. So we need a lot of experience-based, we have a lot of experience-based knowledge. People know quite a lot about teaching. I mean, they've been doing it for years. And you need to share that in a different way maybe than other. But we also have this scholarship of teaching and learning that the academy is based on. And that kind of requires you to share your knowledge, just as in research. You can do a lot of research. If you don't tell anybody about it, it's not seen as worth very much because it doesn't add to the knowledge of the world. And the same maybe goes for collegiality. It's not only supporting each other, creating a nice and good culture, and seeing students learning within our program, at least, as our common task. It's something that we as a group of academics, we really want to see, you know, create a good program, not just a good course individually. So I think that's maybe what we see as the reasons that I think this is emphasized very highly.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting that we're talking about collegiality in terms of higher education teaching, because we don't talk about it in research. We take it for granted that you do attend conferences and you do talk about your research to others, not only because you have to share your research because that's part of your salary structure, that you have to share your research in publications, but also because you're generally interested in your research and you want to learn. You want to build on what others have been doing. And that's how we sort of move science, that we learn what others are doing and we build on that and then we move forward. But we don't see that in teaching. But it's totally the same issue, that we talk about teaching not because we're required to present what we've done in teaching because that's the way to get into the teaching academy, but because we learn from listening to what others have tried and failed, and maybe a conversation about why do you think this failed in this situation, and get feedback on what we have done and might have failed or might have worked but didn't work for another person, and then we can have the conversation. So what is different for you than it is for me? Why did this work for me and it doesn't work for you? So that we can build on it. And we would never kind of think that this was pointless for research, but it's sort of an issue to get people to understand that teaching is not your dirty underwear. It is something that we can improve the university by talking about.
And I think, and in the last decades or so, we have seen quite a lot of change within, at least in our university, and probably that's the only university I know. But we have, and most of the initiatives to support teaching and teaching development has actually been to create spaces and venues and areas for that discussion and dissemination of my knowledge and experiences. Mm-hmm. So we have teaching coffees, we have the teaching academies, that's partly that is the goal of that, and all kinds of things that we have been developing. And I'm just worried that, because I've heard for people who are interested in the academy saying, I come from a place where there's a limited opportunities to have a discussion. I'm required to have a discussion and collegiality, and my colleagues don't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
What do I do about it? And it's often like in the courses in teaching, in our courses in higher education pedagogy, what they appreciate most is to meet with teachers from other fields and other universities and other departments and say, oh my God, you can actually talk across borders like that. Doesn't have to be in your rather boring, small, tiny department where nobody might not be interested in teaching. So you can probably find other venues that are open to you.
But there are also like your subject conferences increasingly have a track for teaching your subject.
Yeah.
And there you can meet people from all over the world teaching the same subject, because that's also a thing that I did appreciate of the diploma in higher education teaching, talking to people from other fields. But we also sometimes hear that, there isn't like, maybe you can do this in social sciences, but I teach another subject and it's totally different. But then at the next conference, see if there is a track for higher education teaching, and then you can participate in that. But I mean, you could also co-teach a course. Like I have co-taught courses with another teacher, and then you have someone to talk about, because you have to talk about the course that you're teaching. And then there are students. You can talk about teaching with students.
I will pick out the students, because they are very important in that dialogue as well. I mean, they can be colleagues in their learning, so that obviously they are somebody who you should listen and talk to.
Well, and one thing that I've realized is, I think we need to stop putting up these barriers between, student and teacher. I mean, they're not my students, they're near peers, that are going to be the next generation of professionals. So they should absolutely be involved in this conversation as much as humanly possible.
Yeah. No, I think that.
Yeah, just because we had another talk earlier about student-centered learning, and I think much of what we said there also applies to collegiality. It's about learning together, like a social construct that you build on somebody else's experiences, that you need to talk and discuss to be able to learn. So I think there are also relations to that concept as well.
Yes, and I think that I know, because I've talked to quite a few people that have applied and successfully gotten in, but in the first round found it the hardest to write about collegiality. And when it was in my cohort, people that I knew, and you go, but you have already participated in this project in developing your subject across countries in a European project. That is collegiality. If you have a project in organizing your subject, and you're talking about how you can best do that, that is collegiality. And I think that even just in front of the coffee machine, or as Sean told us about earlier, a conversation with a colleague about, what do we do about plagiarism now that you can churn out an essay with artificial intelligence? That is participating in conversation about teaching. But once you write the application, you don't say that I talk to this person at the coffee machine and I talk to this person at at lunch, you have to kind of reflect on, who am I in this conversation? What did I learn? Why has the conversation been important to me? How has it translated into my teaching? Because obviously we're participating in this conversation, not to participate in the conversation, but to make the teaching better, to improve the student learning, to improve the university in general. So I think that you need to kind of think, why am I doing it, and what do I, contribute and gain from it. So
yeah,
is that the core? But yeah. I think that, yes, we don't question why we participate in this conversation about research, and the sort of the ideas behind it are pretty much the same. But apart from participating in conversation about research to further research, we need to translate that into how do we further our teaching based on the conversation we have about teaching.
And I mean, I think what we need to realize and need to accept is these two conversations are synergistic. My teaching absolutely informs my research, and vice versa. I can count on my hand. I mean, okay, it only goes to 5, but there are at least 5 examples of times, in the course of teaching, in conversations with students, I've had ideas come out that are absolutely vital to my future research. Didn't know it at the time, but it does happen. And the same goes in the other direction.
Yeah.
And that goes with, but I think you are very good colleagues, and I have really liked talking to you, the two of you. So
very good conversation about teaching. And yes, thank you very much for the conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.